Hello and welcome back to Locked On Oilers. On today's episode, how would Dylan Holloway fit into today's lineup? We'll take a look at that. Plus, what do the Oilers need to do to win in Game 4 tonight? All that and more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers.
You're Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to the Locked On Oilers podcast. I'm your host and former Game Day Oilers producer, Brett Holden. Thank you so much for joining us today. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about just how much Dylan Holloway deserves to be in the lineup and where he would slot in the Oilers lineup. That'll be coming up on today's episode. Plus, what are the lines actually looking like at practice today heading into Game 4 as well? And who is actually missing in practice for the Oilers? We will talk about that. Plus, the three things the Oilers need to do tonight in Game 4 to win and put an absolute chokehold in the series on the Calgary Flames. All that and much more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you find your podcast. Plus, we're here on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. How's it going? I got my jersey a little messed up over here, so I had to fix it before we got on, but that's okay. Let's get started with the lineup tonight for the Oilers. No changes. No changes for the Oilers, as they are going to have the exact same lineup that they deployed in Game 2 or in Game 3, excuse me. They will deploy into Game 4 as well. Is it the right idea? Yeah, a little bit. We'll get into why I think Dylan Holloway should be in the lineup for the Oilers, but let's take a look at the lines for those who may forget from last game. Evander Kane will line up next to Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. The three-headed monster will be running amok on the Calgary Flames, hopefully in Game 4. Once again, Zach Hyman, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Jesse Puljujarvi will be the second line. Jesse Puljujarvi has had a much better series against Calgary. I mean, a lot of people will still say that he's firing into his teammates' skates, but he's been much more noticeable in this series. So, and plus, that line was one of Edmonton's best lines in the entire game in Game 3. So, not much to change there. Warren Foegele will line up next to Ryan McLeod and Kyler Yamamoto. A nice little line there. A lot of energy going for the Oilers through that third line. And again, you want to talk about a layered cycle for the Oilers. Those three guys can just fire it around in below the face-off dots and really force the issue for the the Calgary Flames, excuse me. Plus, they're fast. We want to talk about a transition game, which was the massive low point for the Calgary Flames in Game 3. Not a bad line to do that. So Foegele, McLeod, and Yamamoto make up the third line. On the fourth line, Josh Archibald, Derek Ryan, and Zach Kassian will round out the fourth line, or the forward groups, I should say, for the Oilers in Game 4. Again, the exact same lineup for the Oilers, but there's just something missing from that team. Why are we still employing Zach Kassian and Josh Archibald out there? Honestly, you know what? Take Josh Archibald out of that conversation. Josh Archibald has been much better than what people actually have been putting him out to be in this series. He goes out there and does the right things. He goes out there and bangs bodies. He goes out there and he's on the penalty kill. He's playing strong hockey in our own end. So why are Oilers fans complaining about what he's doing? Who else are you going to go out there and put in that spot? Derek Ryan, he's already doing that on the exact same line. I really think that if somebody's going to come out of the lineup, it's going to have to be Zach Kassian. But again, we'll get into that in the next portion of today's episode. Let's take a look at the defensemen, because this is where the Oilers were missing somebody in practice today. The first pairing will be Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci. Duncan Keith and Evan Bouchard will be the second pairing, and Tyson Barrie and Brett Kulak will be the third pairing. However, Darnell Nurse was not skating today in practice for the Oilers. It seems maybe not necessarily precautionary, but just more of a hey, take a day. And nothing really much has come out since practice or why Darnell wasn't on the ice. Don't really expect much with just how much Jay Woodcroft has let out in the media recently in his post game and pregame and basically all of his press conferences, really. So I don't really see much coming out from that. But Darnell Nurse, that core injury, that core muscle injury, just really sticking with people's minds, and I really think that really kind of hinders the defenseman for the Oilers. Again, Darnell Nurse has been far from the Oilers' best defenseman in the playoffs, not only in this series but in these playoffs. Brett Kulak and Tyson Barrie, hands down, have been the Oilers' best defenseman. And Cody Ceci had a great game in Game 3 as well, playing through also possibly a broken finger, as we saw him potentially mouth to TD4s as well in Game 3. Are the Oilers' top defensemen really that healthy? I mean, everyone's dinged up at this moment in time, but the Oilers' defensemen, especially in Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci being banged up, might not be great for the Oilers. Obviously, Cody Ceci Darnell Nurse, not skating today for the Oilers, so we will see just how much that affects the Oilers. And plus, starting in goal for the Oilers, Mike Smith. So those are some big, not necessarily big news for the Oilers, because it is the exact same lineup that the Oilers put out there in probably, as we said, their best game of the playoffs. So why mess with that? Well, because there's a guy who is chomping at the bit for his opportunity. There is a guy who is just on the outside of making the Oilers lineup, who might be an X factor in this series. We will talk about him in just a second, but first, I want to tell you about Built Bar, because I always talk so much about Built Bar. I'm so excited to talk about Built Bar, but I want you to imagine something. I love brownies. I imagine you love brownies. But you know what I love more? The brownie batter. Just close your eyes and put your finger into the brownie batter. Imagine eating it up. Well, sometimes when I sometimes when I make the brownies, sometimes I eat half the batter, and that's not good for me. But the people over at Built has made a brownie batter puff that is actually good for you, and it has some protein in it. Excuse me, with this new creation, there is no better puffs that Built has created. They are available right now at built.com, but I can't promise you that they will be available tomorrow. They are going fast, and they're only there for a limited time as well. With 140 calories, 17 grams of protein, and only 7 grams of sugar, brownie batter puffs are the perfect pick-me-up for any day. And they're made with collagen protein, which your body actually absorbs much faster and more efficiently as well. And it provides tons of health benefits along with that. The brownie batter puffs will have you completely forgetting that you're eating a protein bar. No need to pinch yourself. This is real life. Go to built.com and get the brownie batter puffs now. As you're over there at built.com, make sure you use the promo code LOCKED15, that is locked 15, and get 15% off your next order. That is promo code LOCKED15, locked15, to get 15% off your next order at built.com. Oil country. The Oilers are one win away from putting a 3-1 series lead up on the Calgary Flames on the first Battle of Alberta in the playoffs in over 30 years. What could be better? Thank you so much for tuning in to Locked On Oilers and making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. For your next listen, make sure you check out Locked On Now, as they have nightly recaps of every NHL game with analysis from our local experts. It is free and available wherever you find your podcasts. Excuse me, a little phlegmy this morning. Let's get to the player that really a lot of Oilers fans really want to see. I mean, Oilers fans have wanted to see him since he signed his entry-level contract. And he had a very popular season, a very great season with the Wisconsin Badgers in the NCAA a couple years ago. And then he got his chance with the Bakersfield Condors this season, kind of test out that wrist that he had surgery on, get back into shape. And a lot of Oilers fans, and probably a lot of people inside the organization, wanted to see Dylan Holloway play as well. Yeah, we're talking about, excuse me, Dylan Holloway today. When is he going to crack the lineup, guys? Dylan Holloway deserves to be in the lineup. We mentioned I mean, Zach Kassian's playing, what, 5 minutes a game while Milan Lucic is going and running the Oilers goaltender, and the guy's doing nothing on the bench? Like, even Milan Lucic, who's playing not much more than Zach Kassian is in this series, is having a bigger influence on this series than Zach Kassian. And this was what the Oilers signed Zach Kassian $3 million plus for. The Oilers saw him do that against the San Jose Sharks in the playoffs, and they're like, oh, if you're going to do that every time, here you go. But guess what? He's not. He's playing 4 minutes a game, hardly going into any checks, and then when he does drop the gloves, he just goes down onto the ice and goes, oh, okay. I guess you kind of did what you were there to do. It's not enough. It is not enough from Zach Kassian for the Oilers to win a series or to win a Stanley Cup. So why is he still in the lineup? We talked about just how much more Josh Archibald is doing for the Oilers. He's out on the PK. He's out on the forecheck. He's getting under people's skin. He drew at least one penalty against Trevor Lewis, if not two, in Game 3. He's actually doing stuff out there. He's actually going out there and banging bodies and making plays. Zach Kassian's just out there to be a warm body. So why are the Oilers not replacing Zach Kassian with Dylan Holloway? Move Fogle back onto that fourth line with Derek Ryan and Josh Archibald. And I think a lot of people would agree with me. That's a very solid line. That's a line that has speed, that has grit, that can go out there and force the issue for the other team. And then when you bring in Holloway, you can have a lineup, or a line, I should say, of Holloway, McLeod, and Yamamoto. 3 guys who played very well in Bakersfield. 3 guys who play a very similar game. That's not even a third line. That's almost a 2B. What are we doing? So far in the AHL, Dylan Holloway in 33 games played, 8 goals, 14 assists, 22 points. And then in the playoffs, in 5 games played, 2 goals, 2 assists for 4 points. The guy's productive, whether that's on the score sheet or not. He is the exact guy, the exact prototypical player that you need to win this series. He is tough. He is young. He's fast. He is fantastic on the transition. His skating is almost second to none. And we've said that about how many Oilers? So he obviously fits in. Dylan Holloway, I mean, you look at how the Oilers have scored. I mean, just looking at Game 3 alone, all 4 of the Oilers' goals came off of the transition. This kid is a transition player, forecheck and backcheck. He will be there smart, and he will be in a smart position in the defensive zone, and he will be in a scoring chance opportunity in the offensive zone. Simple as that. The guy goes out there, goes into the dirty areas, will go and win a puck battle, get the puck to your best player, and then you have a cycle. Then you have a forecheck. Then you have a guy who can actually get down in below the goal lines and cycle the puck. Exactly what the Oilers want to do when they get into the offensive zone. Just work that puck below the goal line and see what happens. You're telling me a line of Kyler Yamamoto, Ryan McLeod, and Dylan Holloway is not just going to skate circles around the Flames defenseman that can't even catch Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Evander Kane on the forecheck? To be fair, nobody really can. But then you have three lines who can do the exact same thing. Zach Hyman, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Jesse Puljujärvi did the exact same thing in game 3. Then you go out there and put Holloway, McLeod, and Kyler Yamamoto, and the Calgary Flames defensemen are just sitting there going, can we have a break? Like, come on. What are we missing here? It feels a lot like old man yells at cloud here. But everything that Holloway does just fits into not only the Oilers system, but fits into everything that would help either team succeed in this type of series. But yet Zach Kassian is going to go out in game 4 and play a very strong 4 minutes for the Oilers. As Connor McDavid probably has to go out there and play 20-22 plus. Is that worth it for the Edmonton Oilers? I don't understand. Dylan Holloway needs to be in the lineup for the Oilers. I'm past the point of, oh man, just give him some time. I've seen enough from Oilers forwards. Holloway just brings something different. He just does. Alrighty. Our final period of today as the Oilers and the Flames go up against each other tonight in Edmonton at 7:30 local time. At least it's not an 8:30 game. At least, I mean, I wish it was 6 so then we could get out of here when the light was still out, but that's okay. That's all right. 7:30 is not too bad. Here are the 3 things that the Oilers need to do well to actually put this series in a chokehold heading back to Calgary in game 5. The first thing, you've already said it. I already know that you have said it either out loud or in your head. Get a good start. I mean, I feel like a broken record every single time I come out here to say what the Oilers need to do to win, because it's almost the exact same thing every game from game 1 against the LA Kings. You got to get a good start. You got to keep that crowd into it, as Rasmus Andersson very obviously wasn't lying. As he put it, I mean, the Saddle Dome was louder. Come on. We all know that Rogers Place was rocking on Sunday in game 3, and it will be rocking just as much as it was in game 3, if not more, tonight in game 4. And the only way the Oilers will be able to keep that momentum going is if they have a good start. If the crowd is taken out of it early, then it is all in the Flames' hands. Then it is exactly what Rasmus Andersson said. Then, yeah, the Saddle Dome was louder. The Oilers need to keep the crowd into it early. They need to have a good start. Heck, score first. Why not? Why not? The Oilers have won 6 of the 7 games that they have won. They have scored first in, They have won 6 of the 7. So, pretty important. In every game that the Oilers have scored first in, they've won. So, I guess they've only won 5 of 6. I'm going ahead of myself here. They need to win 3 to get 7. Anyways, I told you I'm great at math. Also, the Oilers need to hit. The other way to keep the Oilers into a good start and keep that crowd into it is hit. Get physical. Anything that the Oilers do, fans get into it. Even if it's their player going down in a hit, they will cheer. Just go and bang a body. Go and push the boards a little bit. Make some noise. Oilers fans will love it. And you're getting into the head of the other team. Plus, keep shots to a minimum. The Calgary Flames love to shoot. In the first period of game 3, the Flames were limited to 7 shots, while the Oilers had 20. It was only a matter of time before the Oilers cracked Jacob Markstrom in that game. And look what happened. He got pulled in the third period. Keep shots to a minimum, get shots on Jacob Markstrom, and that will be big for a start for the Oilers. The second thing the Oilers need to do in order to have success in Game 4 is a layered cycle. It is obvious how good their transition game is, but if you're able to have that layered cycle on top of it, Calgary's going to have nothing. You are just going to suffocate that defense and suffocate their forwards as well, because an extended period of time in the defensive end is much different than an extended period of time in the offensive end. You are exerting so much more energy in the defensive end. So if the Oilers can pin the defensemen and the forwards of the Calgary Flames in their own end while also being just as lethal on the transition, it's game. It's series. It is series for the Calgary Flames. It's done. So the Oilers need to keep that layered cycle for the Oilers to actually have success in Game 4, And the final thing the Oilers need to do to have success in Game 4 is get shots on Jacob Markstrom. Just keep shooting. Just keep shooting. Make him uncomfortable. Just, as we said, suffocate the man. Make him think that the layered cycle is one thing, but once the puck comes out of his hand, here we go. Once again, keep shooting. Don't let Jacob Markstrom get confident again. He looked actually good in Game 3, and he still got pulled. A lot of people were going into the second period were going, this is the Vezina candidate that everybody thought Jacob Markstrom was. Well, guess who got pulled? You can't let Jacob Markstrom feel at all comfortable in this series, or it's over for the Oilers. Jacob Markstrom, I'm not in Jacob Markstrom's head, but it seems like Jacob Markstrom is in his head, as it seems like the Oilers are the only team in the NHL that can actually get to Jacob Markstrom. And guess who the Flames and Jacob Markstrom are playing in the playoffs? The Oilers. And the Oilers know that. Go out there, pepper shots on him. 15 goals against for Jacob Markstrom. I almost said Mike Smith out of habit. 15 goals against for Jacob Markstrom in this series, and 17 if we count those 2 that probably shouldn't have been called back. Not too bad if you ask me. Plus, Jacob Markstrom and the Flames have only lost 3 straight games once all season. So it will be difficult for the Oilers to do that, to have success for the Flames. But if they do against the Flames, but if they do that, those 3 things against the Flames tonight, they'll be just fine. And the Oilers will have a 3-1 series lead on the Calgary Flames. Feels like the 80s again, baby. Thank you so much for tuning in to Locked On Oilers podcast. And thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. For your second listen, make sure you tune in to Locked On NHL. From first round matchups to each and every single little kiss on the Stanley Cup, Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. Hear the latest news and opinions from local experts every Monday through Friday. It's free and available wherever you find your podcast. Plus, it's on YouTube as well. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to this later edition of Locked On Oilers. I'm sorry I didn't get this out earlier, I should say, but I wanted to just watch the lines in practice, just make sure that Dylan Holloway maybe wasn't inserted or something like that. Last time that I made an episode before or earlier than practice, well, Mike Smith was already announced as the starter. So just taking our precautions here, just making sure that you are getting the best listening experience you can listening to Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much for tuning in. Tomorrow we are going to have a full breakdown of Game 4. And will the Oilers be up 3-1 going back to Calgary? Goodness, we hope so. For the betterment of this city. Thank you so much for tuning in. Stay safe. Don't do anything I wouldn't do.